I'm Justin Lassick.
And I'm Mike Battolino.
And you're listening to 70's Big Radio.
Also live stream on Instagram.
Yeah, which the audio's not live, so there's really no reason to say that. But all right, so I don't know when the last time we did a podcast was, but it was
6 years.
Probably 6 years ago, minimum. But Mike is here at my house in Colorado. We have a fire and puppies lying down. Maybe they'll make an appearance. But super excited to do this. We've been talking about it for a long time. I don't remember how to upload this. I don't remember how to do any of this anymore. So I'll figure that out later. At the very least, it'll go on YouTube, but the people that are live streaming can listen to it later. And eventually, I want this shit back on iTunes, but let's get on with it.
Yeah, you haven't forgotten how to do your hair, though. That's for sure.
Thanks. So the one of the major things that keeps popping up and that you'd probably do after having a 6-year break and doing anything is talking about what everybody's been doing since then. I've had a different type of job. Maybe someday we'll get into that, but not right now. But
not right now.
But been basically expanding the knowledge on medical and physical therapy and all kinds of stuff in congruence with that job. What have you been up to?
I didn't know we were going to get into that. Well, let's see. So I separated from active duty. I started a civil service career. I taught crew chiefs for a while. I developed officer courses for a while for the United States Air Force. And now I'm doing a community support function for the installation I work at.
Pause on that, Mike.
Yeah, we're pausing.
You guys in the chat, can you hear Mike okay on Instagram?
Can you hear Mike okay? Oh,
you got I'm assuming a thumbs up.
I don't know. I feel like that thumbs up was. Oh, now there's a wave. Now there's
all right, let's just go back to it. All right, cool.
Okay,
so
right.
You have a wonderful wife.
Yeah.
And
baby.
A wonderful baby.
Yeah, 5.5 months old.
Awesome. So congrats on all that.
Thanks, man.
So then moving on. Somebody said yes, so they can hear you.
Yeah.
Next thing, we'll just kind of go through the crew.
Yeah.
If you want to hit them up, because most of them are around you.
Let's see. So where's everyone at? Brent? Is it Brent? Brent Kim.
Brent Kim.
Yeah, he lives in Dallas, America. He's doing his
on the planet America, right?
Planet America,
okay.
Yeah. So Brent's still doing his weightlifting thing. He doesn't compete quite as much anymore. I would strongly encourage people to follow him on Instagram because his Instagram videos have gotten a little more ridiculous lately as he describes his own lifting technique, and he's gotten into building a bigger engine for his machine through conditioning. So that's been quite fun to watch. He needs to write a book. So if you want Brent to write a book, I would say just shoot him several hundred messages a day and tell him to write a book. I think that'd be a great idea.
Emphasis on 100.
Hundreds of messages. Chris is still running Dallas Strength and Conditioning. He's been doing that for, I think this summer is going to be 5 years. He's not competing quite as much anymore, but he's still, he likes to get ready for beach season every year. So he does a ton of bench press, really works the pectoralis, does a lot of squats. So
he's married, has 2 kids.
He's married, but 2 children. 2 children. Chris is a dad. Chris is a dad. And
so if you ever want to hang out with Chris, you can go to Dallas Strength and Conditioning. If you ever, we'll get to you in a second, but go ahead.
Okay. AC is still in Georgia. He is a strength coach for the company that he works for. He works for, I think they build applications, and then he does a lot of coaching for them, and then he still goes to a lot of Metallica concerts. He does those things. If you follow him on Instagram, you know that. And who else? That's the main part of the crew, yeah? Yeah, I guess.
Sweet. Also, you're running Chrono Strength, which is your kind of little endeavor, and you basically have a group of dudes that follow. They kind of pay for some online programming, but they kind of follow a template, and you watch all their videos.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I run a team of ladies and gentlemen that we all work towards kind of one or 2 competitions at the same time. Like right now, they're working on training for USAPL Military Nationals, and the competition that I'm hosting at the end of March, which is this would be the 3rd annual Elysian Field Strongman Challenge that we run. This all started with Gant Grimes back in the day. If you remember Gant from 70's Big, Gant started these competitions. At this point, we've done 8 Highlanders, and this will be our 3rd Elysian Field. So this is, we've done quite a few competitions, and we like to donate to a different charity each year. This is a pure strongman, so this is That's going to be a farmer's walk with a turn, a Conan's wheel, a car deadlift, last person standing, log clean and press, and a sandbag toss for max height, which they broke my sandbag today training. So if you're watching this, I promise I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at Rogue. Anyway.
When you say last man standing,
Yes.
is that by Russian roulette, or is that oil?
Yeah, there's some firearms
Is
involved.
that lubed up wrestling, or
Sure, yeah,
like
we can bring that back too.
how do you determine if someone is no longer standing?
They would be sitting. They'd miss the log press to the degree that they would fall over.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Sweet. So one of the dudes on there said, "Please revive the site." So that, or like the continuity. Like I would like to do something like Mike. It would be in the future though, where there's like a little group of people following like a training template and kind of getting some guidance. But there's just not a lot of time for me to do that. So if you're wanting more of this stuff, like I have a lot of content ideas, and I just haven't put pen to paper because when I'm not at work, I don't want to get into work. But there are maybe if you guys enjoy like this little cast or this podcast, then maybe that'll give us a little incentive to work on a little bit more. But in any case, the reason that there's nothing with the site or anything is all me. And if you want to follow Mike, Mike is pretty active with his little community, and he posts stuff his training all the time. Speaking of which,
Yeah.
why don't you just talk about what you kind of mentioned what you're training for, but we'll talk about what we're training because there's been a couple of questions.
So I think I was last time I was Bigger Mike. I think when we were together.
Oh yeah, Big Mike.
Big Mike. So before, I think the last time I saw Justin, I was at least 280, I think, but I got up to close to 300 when I was trying to compete with the heavyweight strongmen. It just wasn't working for me. I just couldn't. My static strength, I couldn't hang with them. So I decided about 2 years ago, I decided to become a heavyweight, so 265, and then still didn't want to do that, so I decided to become a middleweight, so went in about 230, and then the past year was my first full year competing as a 231, and it went really well. I did a couple of powerlifting competitions those went well, and then I did a couple of, I got close, I'm getting close to my all-time PRs with powerlifting, being 70 pounds lighter, which is nice. And then I did a couple of middleweight strongman competitions, and those went well. So this year I've got to probably train for a bigger strongman competition in the middle of the year, and then we're going to do USAPL military nationals together in Killeen, Texas. Just had a great time last time we were in Killeen. Justin was there. That was a fun time. 2012 nationals, Raw nationals. Yeah, before it got so big that's when there weren't 1,000. There are 1,000 people that go to nationals every year, right?
That compete?
Yeah, 1,000.
Holy shit!
So now
we went to the first one. That was in Denver, right?
Yeah, the one we went to in Denver. That was like
Denver, Scranton,
Denver, Scranton,
and Killeen.
Denver, Scranton, Killeen. Yep. And then I did one more in Orlando, and then I took a few years off, and then Chris and I went back to Scranton in 2015, and then I haven't gone back to Raw Nationals. I don't know, it's a little bit too big now. Like there was a meet in town a week before or a week after Raw Nationals.
What's in town mean?
Wichita Falls, Texas.
Okay.
Wichita Falls, however you'd like to call it. I can't tell you how many people still ask me all the time. They're like, "Do you train at the athletic?" All the time, I get that question. I'm like, "No, I train in my home gym because I do strongman stuff."
Your gym's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I've invested a little bit.
900 square feet.
900 square feet.
How many? 4 squat racks?
Yep, 4 squat racks.
You gonna want more of that?
Nah, I'm pretty okay. I'm pretty regular for now.
Okay. You have Atlas stuff. What kind of strongman stuff you have? Like implements? You have yoke. You have.
What do I have for strongman? Is this some kind of joke? So let's see. I've got a ton of kegs, a ton of sandbags, a bunch of circus dumbbells, a bunch of logs, a bunch of Atlas stones, a few Husafel stones, a Magnuson carry, a frame, a few sets of farmer's handles, a couple of yokes. I'm trying to go around the gym in my head. A stone of steel. So Mike Bartow's Power Center. I know you're probably not familiar with Mike, but he makes a lot of stuff with washers in it. All of his stuff has washers. So I periodically be
like little men who wash plates.
Yeah, little men who wash plates.
Okay.
So inside I have a big top circus dumbbell that has washers. It's plate loadable. It's all old school looking. Yeah, his stuff has a lot of washers in it. Strongman throw bag that we broke today. Apparently, I'm not there, so Ricky broke that, but it's cool. Still love him. He sent me a picture of the zipper. Figured I'd be really mad, but I'm just a little sod. What else? Axles, jerk boxes, bunch of old school dumbbells. I don't know, just a lot of stuff. Every time I come across a good deal, and a Conan's wheel. I recently got a Conan's wheel. Yeah.
So if you want to hang out with Mike, then
hit me up.
He's in Wichita.
At
He's in Wichita Falls. I've been skiing a lot, so that's kind of interfered with training a little bit. Like I hang out between like 205 to 210 most of the time.
205 what?
205.
205
to 210. And it's all train. Work stuff gets in the way of training quite a bit, but I still will do the standard lifts. I'm not really doing any of the weightlifting. It kind of jacks up my knees and kind of interferes with recovery for other stuff. But doing a lot of conditioning too, like sprints, assault bike stuff. I live at 8,500 feet, so all that stuff is very difficult here. Starting to row a little bit more, but assault bike and sprinting and pushing sleds, chopping wood. We chopped wood yesterday. Yeah. So, but I've been skiing a lot. I've been like 20 days this year. And I like to get off piste, off groomers, and get rowdy in the pow. Rowdy in the powd. Rowdy in the pow. Row in the pow is what we say all the time. Yeah, but we don't ever say that. But yeah, skiing's sweet, and it's interesting doing like an activity that is disrupted to training and other stuff in life, like work, to the point where like having to like train around that. So like if I go on the weekend, if I go on a Saturday and Sunday or just a Saturday, I'll take like 2 days off and then I'll squat early in the week. So by the time the weekend comes, I've got fresh legs to just fucking attack skiing, because I like to do it really aggressively. I'm not like awesome at it, but I'll go on black diamonds.
He does everything aggressively. Drives aggressively, drinks coffee aggressively, music aggressively. Your nighttime routine aggressive.
Do you think it's aggressive?
So you should talk. I mean, you should talk about the red line.
We're going to talk about sleep, because I think sleep is a huge. That we'll get to that in a little bit. But Mike was amused. I was walking around with a red lens headlamp, and
brushing your teeth with the red lens headlamp.
That is how I live. All right. So I want to get into a question real quick. Okay. I don't know if I can look at things while this is casting. I have the question I have a couple questions in my head from reading them, but I don't know if I can see new ones on Twitter and Instagram on here.
You could probably see him. Well,
that's assuming that person is live on here. There's a guy on here who said he's in Chile.
There's a guy who said he lives.
Yeah. Well, true, which is mildly not true, but no, but there's a guy in Chile. He's doing I think he said he's doing power cleans. So assalamu alaikum, which is not what you say in Chile, but Jay, you remember Jay Statfield? He goes, "What's wrong with Wolfie?"
Oh, Wolfie? I can hear him barking. Wolfie's fine, honey. Wolfie's just fine.
Ching.
Where are you? Where are you? Your foster parents are dead. I still do a lot of Terminator 2 quotes. Not as many as I used to, but I still. Yeah.
You won an online competition with.
I won a shirt from Spot Me, bro. I don't even know if that's a site anymore.
But wasn't it for your foster parents?
That quote.
Your foster parents are dead.
Yeah, everyone, they're like, "What's the best Arnold quote?" I said, "Your foster parents are dead."
I also like "Nice night for a walk." That one's a good one.
It is, but it's like it's more traditional versus "Your foster parents are dead," which people are just like.
I also like, you can't just go around killing people. Why not? I'm a Terminator. Like, that one's good.
We should watch Terminator 2 and live stream us watching it.
So then I'm gonna see if all this stuff is mostly on Instagram. Facebook is a thing of the past, really, and I would have to say I haven't really looked at it in 6 years. But nobody's commented on that. That's good. We got a lot of questions on Instagram. This is really, not only is this good podcasting, this is good casting of trying to figure out technology. So
you need a good look at your hair, though. So it's okay. Hey, real quick, like while we're doing this, so I was telling Justin earlier that a lot of people that used to follow the site still reach out to me periodically for coaching, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I've been following your stuff for years. We followed it on 70's big," and there were people that were following it like when they were deployed, and like, yeah, but that's we watched 70's big and we read all the article posts and followed your guys' competitions and whatnot. But there was a a guy I was telling Justin about named Steve, and him and his wife just had their second daughter last night. He said it happened during deadlifts, like he was deadlifting and he had to go the call and had to go to the hospital. So I was gonna be like, did you finish the session? I mean, you could have just knocked out like an AMRAP, got your volume in, but it's fine. No, I'm just kidding. That's awesome.
Is he one of your guys?
He is.
Okay.
Yeah, but he followed the site for, I don't know, gosh, you started in what? Was it 08 or 09?
2009, September of 9.
And I moved here 2 months later.
Yeah, you got there in like October, November.
November.
Yeah. All right, so I have a bunch of topics. I want to get, if I turn this off, then you guys just log back on when I get back.
What are you trying to do?
I'm trying to look at all the, I can't minimize this. I have to end the live video to look at the messages. So we'll be back. We'll be back in a second. I'm going to go and pause the podcast because this is terrible podcasting. Stand by. And we're back.
There's windows all over.
Okay. All right, so just acquired some of the questions that were on my phone. Apparently you can just pause the video if you minimize it. Whatever.
All right. Who is your daddy and what does he do? Reasonable question.
Go ahead.
Well, are we going to get pretty dark here? I mean, my dad passed away about a year and a half ago, but my dad was badass. So he's a great man. Great man, and I miss him.
Thanks for bringing it up, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. I haven't seen that dude in a long time. Old Mark Murata. Update. Okay, what does your training look like now? Justin kind of already touched on that.
Oh, yeah, so both of us talked about that.
Yeah. What stuff?
This is from Ryan Evans on the Twatter.
Most awesome story as of late?
What cool shit have you all been doing? Most awesome stories as of late. Do you have an awesome story?
I was just going to say the awesome story has to do with the American Airlines losing my bag.
Go ahead.
Well, it was almost comical. They went back and forth. They're like, it'll be there at 5, 7, 9, 11, 5:30 in the morning. When you wake up, it'll be there. And then shout out to Denise who hooked me up on the phone. And she was so nice.
Shout out.
Come on, I mean. She obviously just gets yelled at all day for people that are just furious at her who did not contribute at all to losing their bag. And then it ended with some dude walking up Justin's street because he didn't want to drive through the snow. And he's just walking with my bag, like looking at his phone, just walking by. And Justin goes, hey, there's your bag. And now the bag's here. Now I got the 70's big shirt. Hey, you can still buy these. The Spreadshirt store still exists.
Also, a dude asked that where can he get 70's big merchandise? So I don't really get any money from the Spreadshirt thing per item, but the shirts are still on there and all the same designs that are on there. Maybe they'll be updated, but if you just go to 70'sbig.com, I think there's the store icon. They're on there still. So still works if you're ever wanting that stuff. And then I'd like to get tank tops on there because I have a tank top still, but it's getting old.
So, do you want to answer this question? I think this is a pretty good one.
Sure.
This is from Screenshotted Question. This is from Reply to Your Story. I don't know who this is from.
Yeah, I screenshotted these and sent them to Mike, and so I don't know who sent this. Somebody from Instagram.
What are some solutions to general training burnout? I don't know. You can go ahead or you want.
So I think one of the Gant used to always say this when we lived in Texas and everything. But Gant would always like funnel people into competing in something because it keeps your attention on something, and then you're training for an actual particular event or a competition. So it like funnels your training into something and gives you purpose because we say the word training in order to provide purpose. Like training is for a goal. Like the goal can be to get stronger, to get more conditioned. The goal really could be to like be healthy too. But we say the word training in order to imply that you're training for like a goal. And so if you don't have a specific goal to train for and you're just generally like, I want to be stronger, that's kind of weak.
Yeah.
So competition definitely funnels into that. So every year we used to do this thing called Letter of Intent Day on the website where like in January it'd be like, hey, what are you going to fucking do this year? Like what competitions are you going to commit to? Or like, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to hit like a 400-pound squat, 500 pounds, 600, whatever. So that definitely funnels people into things. When I met Chris early on and we were kind of becoming friends and not quite super good friends yet, I was like, what are your goals? And he was deadlifting around 450 for 5 at the time. And he weighed like, I want to say like probably like 235, 240. I was like, what are your goals? And he's like, I want to deadlift 600 for 5. And I was like, okay. And I was like, like you're deadlifting 450 for 5. That seems very lofty. But then like the fucking dude did that. I don't know how much longer. It was definitely not more than 18 months because that's the time I spent in Texas. So it's probably like within a year he fucking.
So he pulled 600 for 5. I think right after the first time he pulled 700. So that would be the beginning of 2012. So he pulled.
Oh yeah, so I did move away. So it took him a couple years.
He took that Arkansas shirt is still hanging on my wall because the joke was that he was gonna deadlift 600 for 5 and then the shirt would explode off of his body. The shirt, I mean, it was so tattered and gross by the time it was done. But that shirt's still.
Oh, I forgot about that. That was his deadlift shirt.
I think he pulled 600 for 6. I think he actually did it for 6 the first time he did it.
So like, in that instance, we weren't competing at the time, but he was like, I want to accomplish this, and then we just fucking worked towards it, and then like. It wasn't long that he gained a lot of body weight because his back was fucking huge. Yeah. It was like he weighed like 235, 240, and then we were training together. I was like, dude, your back looks fucking huge. How much do you weigh? And he was like, I don't know. And then I was like, well, let's go weigh yourself. And he was 275. And then like another 2 months went by, and I was like, dude, you look fucking huge. Like how much do you weigh? And he's like, I don't know. And he was like 290. So like
he was eating a bunch of food, and then he was drinking a bunch of natural light. I think that was a combination of those things.
Coors.
I think he did. I remember one time it was when we were still doing 5x5, so he must have been on Texas Method. But he had either gone on vacation the previous weekend or just drank a bunch of beer. And that Tuesday, like, it was a rough session, but I think he hit a PR 5x5. And I was like, dude, if you've been, like, you look pretty big today. He's like, yeah, a lot of beer this weekend. But I think he ended up squatting at least 500 for 5 sets of 5.
I know he would hang out around there.
Yeah.
Like I think when he was doing 5x5, I think the most. It's hard for me to remember, but I think the most he did was around 530. But he squatted 666 in that one meet, and then pulled 711.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
660 more.
Oh, it wasn't. Yeah.
300 kgs.
Anyway, the point is that when training is getting burned out or you're just burned out on training, like you should figure out why. Like if it's not fun, like sometimes having a good training partner keeps it fun and there's kind of like that accountability. Like all of us used to train together, and then I've had various training partners all the way dating back to like football in high school, but like you remember your good training partners. Mike has like up to 9 people might come on a Saturday.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's like a lot of dudes that'll come and like fucking do strongman shit. So that makes stuff fun. That's what York Barbell used to do back in the day on Saturdays. They would have huge training. Just they'd all train together and have like a barbecue. So like stuff like that can be fun. If you don't have access to people or things like that, then
set up like cardboard cutouts.
There's a meme that's like, this is me podcasting or listening to podcasts, and it's a kid and he's sitting next to just a picture of 3 other people, and he's like having a good time with them, which is part of my life. Just listen to podcasts and be by yourself. So
by yourself with Nana and
the dogs are asleep, so they're not helpful. So if otherwise, maybe the type of template you're on is kind of stale, or maybe the type of activity you're into is stale. Like if you're just lifting, I personally, if you're not a professional in anything, which I would assume that pretty much everybody that's watching or listening to this, they're not a fucking professional. So, Big Chris Riley joined.
Oh. We just got done talking about him.
We're just talking about you. You son of a bitch. Anyway, I love you, Chris. But if you're doing the same type of training, then mix it up. Like I think that if you're not a professional, then you need conditioning in your program for health reasons, and we can talk about that. I'll go into these tangents. So I've been really into.
He said, "Great."
So I've been really into. Somebody said. I've been really into learning a bunch of different type of stuff, and so Rhonda Patrick was on the Joe Rogan podcast a lot, and she has like a bunch of information on like SNPs and genetic polymorphisms and stuff. So that's kind of a tangent away from this conversation. But so she looks at a lot of research about the type of exercise and then the effect it has on the brain, not just the body, but the brain. So like doing high intensity conditioning has a different effect on your brain in a positive way than just doing more endurance type stuff. So that long, slow distance type mentality has benefit to the brain in a different way that high intensity conditioning does, in a different way that strength training does, and all of them are important. So like keeping the brain crisp, important, like crisp meaning like normal brain function and taking care of it, so that when we get older, we're not gonna like divulge into some like Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia. That's a huge part of how I eat and stuff now, because I did the genetic testing, did use 23andMe, took the raw data, put it into Rhonda Patrick's website, and it spit out all these polymorphisms and that they have identified that have to do with different aspects of metabolism or nutrition. But there's these alleles that when you have one of them, it increases your chance of Alzheimer's roughly like 2 times. So 2 times likelihood of getting Alzheimer's. No TBIs or anything. It's just like your risk factor. If you have an allele from both your mom and your dad, it's like an 11 to 15 times likelihood. So I've got 2 alleles, and then I played football in college, and then I've had a different type of exposure to stuff to my brain with work that results in me being kind of worried about having stuff going on later. So I do a lot of stuff with sleep and nutrition that have an effect on that. So we can talk about that a little later, but like that was all an illusion. I brought all that up because there's different types of exercise that influence your brain, and conditioning is important not only for your health but your brain. So if you're not doing conditioning, then you should start learning how to do that, and it can be simple things. But what kind of stuff do you do for conditioning? Because I know you do it in a way that's for your performance, right? For strongman, but you also do a lot of other shit too.
Yeah, but I also kind of do it. I do it for the health benefits too. Maybe maybe I even do it more for that than I do for the strongman.
Yeah.
So no, I go on a lot of I go on a fair amount of walks. I go on 3 or 4 walks a week. I do some kettlebell EMOM stuff every week. I do snatches and cleans on the minute. I do a lot of air dying, a lot of rowing. So a mixture of high intensity stuff and some aerobic endurance things.
So I usually not so much now because of the weather and doing a lot of skiing, but like typically I would sprint every week like 400s, which that's pretty much like a baseline thing. And if you're over like 220, 230, maybe not so much, but like a baseline thing that would help any job that requires physical activity or just maintaining a certain level of like capability and athleticism is doing 400-meter sprints. And I think, do you know who Mark Sisson is?
Mm-hmm.
So Mark Sisson is the Primal Blueprint guy. He is like the whole food brand out now. And I saw a thing on one of his social media. It was like, I haven't run farther than 400 meters in 10 years. Like he only sprints because it's like he does the interval stuff. He does a lot of paddleboarding too. So he's still doing like endurance efforts, but like he used to be into like triathlons and shit like that. And now he only sprints 400. So like, but 400-meter sprints is like one of the best fucking things you could do just to maintain. And if you can build up to that, if you wanted to get really nitty gritty, like in Fit, that book I wrote with Dr. Kilgore and Hartman, I do a whole section on how to like progress the different variables of 400s. But like 400s by themselves is like a great thing. Or you can get on an actual piece of machinery like a rower, an assault bike, which I have an assault bike and I use it all the time. So you can do any type of intervals. It can be simple as like 30 on, 30 off, 60 on, 60 off, 90 on, 90 off, or any variation thereof. Like you were talking about, I know one of my friends does 30 on, 90 seconds off because he's going really hard for the 30. And so sometimes I'll just do minute on, minute off, and I'll cap it to certain wattage so that my heart rate is going to not go higher than 150, 160, which is, I want to say, like not really breaching into the 80 percentile range, or like above 80%. So like you can do things that are like 20 to 40 minutes that are in a lower heart rate range. If you're tracking your heart rate, which I do all the time now for all my training sessions, and then that provides the cardiovascular benefit, the brain benefit, and then there's a huge component which I'll get weird and talk about all the things, but like I'm all about all the holistic health things. So like the mental and emotional health are augmented by these cardiovascular type activities too. So if you're feeling shitty or like you ended up drinking or you just had whatever, you're busy and you have a busy weekend, even doing like something lower intensity, 10 to 20 minutes is something that you just feel better. If your body feels really junky from doing something like biking, low impact stuff is fucking awesome. So yeah, so sometimes I'll just go out there and just low intensity and don't even like put my hands on the assault bike, like just sit there for like 10 I've taken a book out for like 20 minutes and read. I know you used to do book stuff, walking.
I read on the treadmill. I walk during lunch, I read on the treadmill.
Yeah. So earlier in the beginning of the website, Brent Kim is in the house. He just joined. All right, so
we talked about Brent several times.
Podcast is over. We'll see you guys later. No, so the cardiovascular stuff, like early in the website, we was like eating and lifting, and we were kind of like, I was 23 or something. Like all of us were early 20s, and you can do stuff like an asshole in your early 20s, but I'm fucking 32 now, and
you can't,
like how your body is going to function on certain types of diet and certain types of lack of conditioning, like it's hard to recover from that, and so you see a lot.
300 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, like Mike looks great. He's 230 now. He obviously weighs 300 at a time. Like it's fucking insane, and it's just not good for you. So this
wasn't worth it.
Cardiovascular stuff is good for all those reasons: the mental, emotional health, the actual improvement on your system, which is just a general term I use for all those. Like you have your skeletal system, muscular system, nervous system, immune system, cardiovascular system, respiratory, like all that stuff makes up just the body, right? The system. And so like it's when you do those lower intensity things, it just you get circulation of blood flow, you clear out you clear out your lymph system easier. So if you have inflammatory waste in your limbs or you have any kind of edema from just being swollen from training or doing stupid shit, or you have drank or you're sick, like lighter efforts will just like they get your blood circulating is just good for you, and it's a positive influence on your hormones and shit like that.
Do you want to? Can I just a quick? I mean, I know we've been on this question for a while.
Go ahead.
But just a quick one. I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but like, why do you train at all? Like, what's the reason that you train? Like, maybe re-examine that, because if you're
if you just joined or whatever, the original question was like,
what are some
solutions to getting burned out when you're training? Yeah.
Figure out why you started, why you want to continue doing it, and what's going to make you. I mean, because really, there's no question that physical activity is extremely important for every single person, and it might look different for everyone, and that's fine. You don't, not everyone has to squat 5 by 5 every week,
right?
So
certain things are very beneficial. So the fundamentals of training that you should be doing are like, because you want to have your health, you want to have good mental and emotional health too. So you want to have the overall physical and mental and emotional health. You should want to look pretty decent or whatever. Like, so that's always like even though we train for performance, like the physical, sometimes the aesthetic result of that is nice. So like if you want to just have a better body or what, like that could be a motivating factor for someone, and then they train for strength training and conditioning in order to accomplish that. But like if you're fucking burned out, then like if you're always on programs, fuck around for like 3 weeks. Like essentially deload, like curl, whatever. But when you come back, I think all training should be like take your large muscle groups in your joints, do a full range of motion. So squat, press, deadlift, bench, row, and then get balance in your musculature, because if you don't have balance, then you're more susceptible to injuries. Mm-hmm. Take care of your
single leg work, single lateral work.
Yeah. I mean, you can. Usually the back side of the body is the limiting factor. So like back or hamstrings or like glutes. If you have a weakness or you have an area that gives you trouble, figure out why. Like do the appropriate mobility stuff. So like taking care of the body in general. Like if you haven't learned good warm up and after training, you can take that if you need to, or learn the appropriate things to train properly. But like just do the fundamentals and then add in some conditioning. And like if you're not having fun, figure out why.
And do more. I think, and I knew that very early on, I couldn't do powerlifting forever, because just squatting, benching, and deadlifting is extremely boring to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't excite me. But the cool thing about strongman is it's just, I mean, there are just hundreds of variations of all of these different events. So that kept me motivated for a long time. And Justin talked about competing. I don't even like. For a long time, I really cared about competing and really wanted to keep competing. Now I just enjoy training a lot more. And I still compete, but I don't know. I guess I use that as like a goalpost, and I work towards it. But ultimately, I just want to get as strong as I can over the course of my lifetime. There's no rush, for me. Who's someone asked?
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should I call these folks back? We have Sean Owen. I don't know if you remember Sean. Sean's in the video from the February 2013.
Chris said he hasn't warmed up in a year and a half.
Oh, I really imagine Chris like Walking into the gym like, awesome, and then just walking over to a bench and just knocking out sets.
What's the next question before you call?
The next question is, let's talk about the doggies. Bring it over there. And
Somebody
talk
said,
what are the names of the dogs?
Somebody said, what are the names of the dogs? So if you remember Lita, I haven't posted about this on social media because it was very difficult for me, but I had to put Lita down in July of 17. She was a dog that was in all the videos, like at the Wichita Falls Athletic Club. There's like a video of Rip talking. It has a lot of views on my YouTube, and like Lita walks in the background. So she essentially, I grew up with her. She was around me all the time. I had to put her down. She had lymphoma, and so I kept her around. She was on some prednisone for like 6 months. So I had to put her down, and then there's another dog around. Lily's still kicking, if anybody remembers. But I'm gonna pause the podcast. Stand by. So those are the dogs. We're back on the podcast.
Someone asked about 70's Big Merc, so we said you can go to the Spreadshirt store.
Took care of that.
Someone asked about, are you ever going to podcast? And then they said, oh, wait, you just said a story about doing one. All right, here's a good one. You ever had a really bad case of bicep tendonitis from low bar squats? Corrected my grip, improved mobility of the shoulders, inflammation still inhibiting. Plan to cut my squat frequency twice a week down from 3. Anything else you would do to help the situation?
Well, first, like, I wonder why that dude was squatting. I don't know how old that guy is, but like, unless you're young and you're on a linear progression, you don't need to be squatting more than 3 times a week, or you don't need to be squatting 3 times a week. Twice a week is like if you're trying to aggressively push the squat, but we all get to an age where like you have to be cognizant of the total systemic stress you're placing on your body, because it gets to a point where you chronically have too much of that shit, and it really starts fucking with not only the hormones and the body chemistry, but like it just makes training poopy. So the first thing is like, why was he squatting 3 times a week? I think at the end he says like end of the LP. So I think he was on a linear progression. I even guys that are on a linear progression that are, if you're 30 and above, I would never have you squat 3 times a week unless one or two of them was light, or like Bill Starr had this thing. It was like you looked at your days as heavy, medium, or light days. So I would never have like heavy, medium, medium, or heavy, heavy, medium for like guys above 30. I would want light and medium days to, if you're squatting, if you're training 3 days, they all can't be heavy. And if they're all medium, that's one thing, but like one of them usually needs to be light. So if he was squatting, so that's the first thing is like, regardless of what he's doing, like he's obviously doing something weird mechanically, but if he's squatting too often, then that could be a problem too.
So low bar tends to be harder on your elbows for sure.
Yeah.
And the stronger you get with it and the older you get, you have to manage that frequency appropriately. So for me, I actually recently, I low bar every Tuesday. I only started low barring again a year ago. I took 4.5 years off from low barring while I was Big Mike, because Big Mike was high bar squatting, and I got up to high bar squatting over 600, which was cool. But when the belly went away, I went back to low bar, and yeah, so the tendonitis, it would be pretty acute. So I wouldn't say it was chronic because I managed it pretty well. But I actually considered just low barring every other week, and then on the week I wasn't low barring, doing like buffalo bar squats or like safety bar squats. I mean, you're gonna get, it's not as specific, but you have to manage the specificity and then the systemic stress. Like you have to manage all those things, and they become very important when you get older. Because when you're younger, like you said, you can do just about anything. You can low bar 3 times a week. You can deadlift a couple times a week, bench a lot. Yeah.
But overall, like going back to the volume thing, or just the amount of work on your body as you age, you have to progress into it, obviously.
Yep.
So like that's progressive overload is a fundamental principle if you study any kind of programming. So it should always be like, what are you currently adapted to, and slowly building up to it. I never had elbow issues. I haven't high barred since 2000.
High bar or low bar?
Excuse me. I haven't low barred since 2010. Like I went to nationals and I was adapted to low bar when I went to weightlifting nationals. And then what I started training for completely shifted away from weightlifting, even though I still weightlifted for a while. I just don't low bar, but I have never had issues with squatting. So it's most likely due to lever arms. Excuse me, not lever arms, but specifically like anthropometry, like arm length, humerus length with respect to elbow length. Like you've got long ass forearms. I remember from teaching you to power clean. And so like if your forearms are longer relative to your humerus, then that might just be where you always have you might always just have like a fucking weird stress. Is it your medial? Do you get on medial? The medial aspect of your elbow, is that where you get it? So that's the part. That was the area that you would expect it, like the tennis elbow area. So I'd want to see it. That dude can. I would probably go to Mike because I'm going to be less responsive most likely than Mike. But if you send Mike like a video or something, then he'll look at it. And if it looks fucked up, then he'll be able to, like, you can easily see right away in a video how someone is racked. Because if it's not, if that bar is not on your rear delt going across the spine of your scapula in a very particular way. It's good podcasting right there with dog barks. If that bar is not in the right spot on the back for a low bar, then you can run into some issues. So someone in the chat asked something about, like, I'm learning the Olympic lifts as I'm doing jiu-jitsu. Should I get a coach? Like, absolutely. Like, it's very, very, very difficult to coach yourselves on lifts. If you were going to try to do so and you're going to be belligerent and not get a fucking coach, then I still like these videos Glenn Penley did. I think he was still at California Strength when he did them. But they're just like the fundamental lifts where he goes to like 3 positions, and those 3 positions should be part of your warm-up every day, and then those help substantially. Because I learned the lifts one way, and it was pretty inefficient. And then I kind of like learned Penley's method. I kind of like taught myself, but I would absolutely say like get a fucking coach, because like when you don't have a coach, then not only will you be improperly loading shit, which will lead to potential complications like soft tissue or like joint issues, you just are gonna have a bad time because you're always gonna be like, man, this is so hard, when a coach can kind of give you the clarity.
So just to clarify, was this specifically about weightlifting?
Someone in the chat was like, I'm teaching myself weightlifting.
I would never attempt to teach myself weightlifting. And this is also extremely hard to. It's been extremely hard for me to learn, but once you build those patterns that are garbage, they are so hard to unlearn. You have to start with a good coach and take your time.
Yeah, that goes for pretty much most things. Like if you learn bad habits, like it can be in shooting, it can be especially in weightlifting, it can be really in anything where you're doing any kind of movement-based thing, and you establish bad movement patterns, or like your motor pathway is consistently doing one thing, it's extremely difficult to relearn that thing. Like there's a little thing I do, and it's never been a problem for me, but I've coached people that have strained stuff in their neck when pressing. But when I press, even though I could tell people not to do this when I coach them, like I would add like a little bit of head thing forward at the top. And chronically, though, like from car accidents and football, I have neck problems. So I was like, I should probably not be doing this, because I tell people this all the time, and then my C-spine's moving under load. So it's very difficult for me, like especially when I'm pressing heavy, to like not have my neck like just punch forward. So I like try and keep my chin back, but I'm not being coached either. I'm like doing it on my own. I'm not even filming my shit. So it's like never. I would even go so far as like regular squat, bench, dead. Like always get a coach. Like if you've never gotten a coach, then I would spend the time to drive to somewhere or to pay someone, not just on the fucking internet, because that's the big thing now, to like actually have a good coach, which there are not a lot of good coaches either, but like to actually get someone that can get eyes on your shit, and that's very important. And then Mike and I were talking about this yesterday, but like when you think about coaches, physical therapists, chiropractors, doctors, really any like professional job that's supposed to help you, 50% of a graduating class is in the bottom half of the class. So 50% of the people that are in any kind of graduation for any kind of professional thing, half of them sucked enough where they weren't in the top half. So like it's very difficult to find good physical therapists, or at least ones that work with actual athletes. Massage therapists, like even harder, like to find someone who will actually get into your tissues and do it properly. Chiropractors, coaches especially. So like I would even say that like that only the top % of any of those jobs are worth a fuck. And then of those that are worth kind of a fuck, probably less than one, like some arbitrary number of less than 1% is actually good at their fucking job. So finding that is very difficult, and hopefully word of mouth can develop that. But like, I'm very particular about nutritionists and coaches and physical therapists and chiropractors, because I know I like human anatomy. I don't know all of it, but I like physiology and anatomy. And when I basically ops test, like test people what their knowledge is before I ever work with them, because if they're not very good, then I don't want them to handle anything.
So AC just texted me and said some guy in the parking lot of the gym just said, "Are you AC from 70's, Big?" And he said, I responded with yes, and don't ever speak to me again. I can almost guarantee he did not say that, but I think it's awesome that that guy said that. Are you AC from 70's, Big? Are you looking at the herniated disc question?
Best lower body move for someone with herniated discs. Just without explanation, what's yours? Just say the exercise. What's the best if
Lower body exercise?
Yeah, lower body exercise for herniated disc. What would you say without explanation?
Belt squats?
I was gonna say like reverse hypers maybe, but
In terms of like loading the lower.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just like I just threw an exercise out because that was the first thing that popped in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I would talk to a chiro and PT that's good. And again, I've been fortunate enough to be to have found some that I really trust, like Dr. Jacob Harden. I like him a lot. He helped me with some hip shift issues that I have.
Like you talked to him personally?
I went to his clinic in Orlando.
Oh, cool.
When I flew to see my
I
mom,
like his physical therapy stuff, but if I was going to be a very shallow, non-empathetic person, which I really am attempting to be empathetic and stuff, he's just like a weird guy.
He was a cool dude in person. I liked him a lot.
Cool. I'd like to meet him, but
he's big on Stuart McGill.
So I would say with any back issue with herniated stuff, or any back issue period, like because there's a lot of pelvis related stuff that affects pain, like the PSIS, which is right in that SI, the sacroiliac junction area, and then you have your like lumbar sacral kind of junction, and then your like thoracic lumbar. So those are the problem areas, but 100% of the time, consume Stuart McGill stuff. He's got like a book for the layman. It's not just like he's got
the gift of injury. That one? Or he's got some.
No, I think it's called Backfit. His website's Backfit Pro. Whatever it is, it's like written for the layman. It's not like a textbook.
Well, there's that now. There's that one now. Is the gift of injury.
And then so learn how to properly brace your spine. So that's something that was left out of the early days of my coaching and like learning from people. There's certain types of teaching progressions for beginners. I would definitely have this as an inherent aspect of someone's training and how to teach them to move properly, which is extending the T-spine and then bracing the lower abs to keep the trunk so that it's not hyperextending. Because I don't know how, like, you see flexion injuries when people round their back and deadlifting, but you see a lot of like extension-based injuries when people are overextending, pressing too, yeah, and that's because of lack of shoulder mobility. But I'm getting on a tangent talking about that. But basically, learning how to brace the trunk properly, where it functions as a column, and then the only thing that moves is not the pelvis moving back and forth, but the femurs attaching into there, so that you're going into hip flexion and extension properly without the pelvis moving with respect to the trunk. That's wildly important. So like when I squat and I high bar squat, so I'm looking forward, like before anything ever comes out of the rack, like anytime the bar moves, you should be pretending like it's 600 pounds or like your 1 rep max, so that everything is braced. When I unrack it, I walk out, I don't ever lose the structure in the trunk of the column of the trunk. Yeah. And then as I go up and down, I'm keeping the tension on the lower abs. Like that's inherent in all the exercises I teach nowadays, is from the beginning when someone's learning, so that they don't revert into bad spinal habits, because that's usually what this shit has. Rucking with military guys, like if you are in the habit of rucking shoulders forward and like doing stupid like shitty stuff in the spine, that will over time grind you down to fucking dust, and that ruins people. Like I have a friend, met him through this website, 2010, I think. Like he got med boarded out of the army, and he's still having spinal surgeries. So
it won't happen overnight, but it'll happen over time.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer Jay's question?
Jay, after he said, "What's wrong with Wolfie?" said he's experiencing tightness in the anterior shoulder and bicep tendon area. It's prohibiting him from pressing, including benching, without them clicking and getting irritated the next day. That is those areas. What are some good mobility movements to undo the gnarliness in the region of the anterior shoulder? Fuck. So like that. I have a topic written down for just physical therapy stuff, like rehab /PT, but like part of this goes into first, what are the mechanics? Because if the mechanics are poor, in particular with pressing, it's going to be a more internal rotation than an external rotation. The external rotation, both in the hips and the shoulders, is going to distribute stuff properly and create more tension about the joint to allow better distribution of the forces in all the musculature. So basically what that means is when your external rotation or the elbows are not flared, then you are safer and better and stronger. So I want to know mechanics, then I want to know frequency of training in a week. And then that also, I want to know the programming, because if they're not appropriate back exercises in congruence with pressing exercises, then we're kind of failing. And I would even kind of push people. Jay's talking in the chat, so his clavicle gets tight and can actually pop like a knuckle first thing in the morning. So, I mean, if that's the case, I don't know why the clavicle. So you have sternocleidomastoid attaching on the clavicle. You have probably scalenes, but then you have tightness around the shoulder, anterior shoulder. So going back to it is I would even say that your pulling exercises, to include band stuff that would be good for the rear rhomboid region and the area at the bottom of the scapula to pull them back and down, which is the lower traps and the serratus posterior inferior, I think is what that muscle is, attaching on the inferior aspect of the scapula. That to include exercises, banded exercises, I would almost have a 2-to-1 pulling to pressing ratio. I don't know what you do in your training. If you have balance in your musculature and you have balance with your mobility, then that's less of an issue. But an active way to kind of protect the shoulders when you have anterior issues is to just do more of the rear shoulder, rear back stuff. So the things that jump out are what are the mechanics? What's the guy's programming? And then what's the guy's mobility stuff? And then from there, do you want to?
I was just gonna say something that I stole from Stan Efforting years ago was about promoting blood flow to that area and finding pain-free movement and moving well through that, whatever is pain-free, doing that correctly. Don't continue to do something poorly just to do something. Do a movement correctly with some sort of pressing variation, promote blood flow to that area, and figure out the appropriate frequency for it. Because it might be just once a week, and you might have to do some unilateral stuff or something. Something.
Two things. Ben Claridad just said hi.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Ben. We were talking about. He said you
fellas look good. Not as good as Ben.
Mike and I were. He said real good. Mike and I were talking about you last night, in a favorable way, of course. But Jay in the chat said he's got 2 or even 3-to-1 pulling to pressing movements. So I think that's a good point that Mike just made. When there is injury or there is dysfunction, we have to do something to improve it, and that's going to typically move into rehab stuff, because just doing the movement more when it's already hurt does not help. Obviously, that's so. If there's someone that's a client or my patient, I'm not going to have them continue doing the thing that hurts. So finding a movement that they can do in the interim is important. That's in addition to diagnosing and starting to treat the problem, and then getting into the rehab/prehab for that particular issue. So for shoulder stuff, it's hard to say without any tests.
Back stuff and shoulder stuff.
I was telling Chris about this because he had a client, so I'll go ahead and talk about it. There's a beer can test for shoulder stuff. It's not the only test. It's just a very quick test that everybody can do. They just need someone else. You put your thumbs up. Someone presses down. Do you have pain? Yes or no? Usually no. Turn your thumbs down. Press down, and the other person will push them down. And if they have pain, then there's usually some sort of superior aspect of the shoulder pain. So that's going to be proximal biceps. Is going to be supraspinatus, because that comes into the same tendon attachment area as the proximal biceps. It can be labral related, and then there could even be a bone spur. There's 4 things that can be wrong in the superior aspect or the upper aspect of the shoulder. And so if you do have stuff that's kind of in the shoulder, then you need worked on, and a professional is always better than not having any kind of professional looking at it. So, but posterior distraction stuff should be part of it. Usually subscap is going to be really tight, the subscapularis, which is your shoulder blades are like this on your back, and on the anterior aspect or the front of the shoulder blade is the subscapularis. So working on that, which sometimes you can't always do. So physical therapist, athletic trainer, or a good massage therapist can help. Jay said he had an MRI done. Usually with this stuff, you don't really see blatant tears. You see just degradation from something over time, or you have soft tissue stuff because of tightness. So doing an appropriate amount of mobility work. So there, I think on the site I have 3 or 5-way shoulder. This is like from 2012, 13 time frame. But Kelly Starrett did like a 5-way shoulder. There's 3 of them in particular that I really like. You got a band on a pull-up bar, and you have flexion and external rotation with the same side knee on the floor. So go check out YouTube, and I can link it on the Instagram if you guys are kind of confused on where it's at. But like flexion with external rotation, and then coming across body so that it's the arm is across your chest, and then you're allowing the shoulder blade to be pulled away from the spine. That'll kind of hit the rhomboid region, and then turning away, almost doing like a warrior pose where the arm is opening up all the fascia and the kind of anterior aspect of the chest. That may not help Jay in this particular problem, but that's kind of like a catch-all that when I have people do that for like 2 weeks straight, they almost always have improvement of mobility and like symptoms. And that's just like super easy to do. Doesn't really even require me doing manual therapy. And like it gets people, usually they have improvement. Like I've never had anyone get worse, and everyone always improves when they actually fucking do it for every day for 2 weeks. So it's hard to say about what's going on with Jay's specific thing, but like anterior shoulder stuff is janky. So like professional is better than not. And things that can be tight are pec minor, teres major, teres minor, subscapularis. So generally speaking, the Trigger Point Therapy Handbook by Claire Davies is a great fucking reference that when you have pain in an area, you can start working on trigger points when you don't have access to these other things. And yeah, bust that out. So knowing musculoskeletal anatomy is key. And I think that if you're willing to spend 5 to 10 hours a week working on your body because you're training, then you should start kind of learning some basic anatomy to take care of that body. So knowing the trigger points is important, and then maintain, like always rolling your body with a rumble roller is very important. I think a rumble roller is like one of the best mobility tools, period. If you're only going to spend $60 on shit, then get a rumble roller and some lacrosse balls. So Mike brought this over. I think so. Musculoskeletal anatomy, trigger points, which is just a fancy term for like where to work on a muscle to decrease the tone in it, or like to like neurologically influence the muscle, or to even relieve tension on the fascia. But I've only fucked around with this. I've only fucked around with this thing today. This thing's expensive. It's the Ther Gun.
That's the 2.0, so it's cheaper now. But
we're not advertising this. Nobody's paying. I would definitely fucking sell it if they wanted to give me one. But this is a gun. I've seen these things in physical therapy clinics. Not this, but like a one that plugs in. It's metal, and like you basically can just work. It's super loud.
I think the newer one that they made.
It's like a drill. But like putting this on trigger points like throughout the body, like there's a spot mid-thigh on the vastus lateralis, which is the lateral aspect near the IT band. Like working on that and just hitting some like that vastus medialis around the knee, like immediately can like just create or relieve some tension on either the IT or like the knee. And this thing's fucking cool. Like we're like
we got a little fired up doing this last night.
Yeah, it's on the back of my neck. It's like orgasmic. And then you can hit like, I've only seen one thing that can really help the QL significantly if you're working on it by yourself, and it's a Theracane, and that's in the Trigger Point Therapy Handbook. I think I kind of I modified the technique, but like this thing I'm holding, the Ther Gun, is the only thing I've found that like, unless you're lying down on the ground with a fucking Theracane, is the only thing that can really do anything on the quadratus.
So you can do this. I mean, very quickly you can make you can feel quite a bit better.
Quadratus lumborum, which sounds like a Harry Potter spell. Like quadratus lumborum, and then like the guy's like he's got like a back thing. But you torn yours?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fuck. So this gun's fucking sweet. Like you can hit most of the body in a minute or two, and there's hitting trigger points and acupuncture sites and stuff with like primes things neurologically also. And this thing's so like so fucking violent with how it like pushes forward that you're also doing something. I don't, maybe we understand this, but I'm gonna explain it. How I think about it, which may not be entirely accurate or whatever, but like when you're getting that pressure and that actual motion on muscles, like you're doing things neurologically that influence the actual tone of that muscle. So like it's possible to take an actuator or activator, I think is what it's called. An actuator is probably a job or something. An activator in chiropractic stuff, and you click it, and all it does is like. If you've been in a clinic and they like do something on your spine where it's a bigger machine, almost like that thing, and it's like pushing on the spinous processes, you can get a handheld one. You guys can't, like you can, but like there's no use for you to do it. But you can like click that 5 times on a trigger point, and it has like a neurological effect. And so I have a friend who's a chiropractor, and he like clicks it around in certain acupuncture sites and just around the knee, like sometimes on the bone itself. And then the knee just feels more stable because you're like activating proprioceptors and shit like that. So so someone's asking about the Ther Gun in the chat. That thing's like $300 fucking.
I think it was.
So it's probably not. It's probably not.
It was 600 originally. Then it dropped to. I think they had a military discount for 5, and then on Black Friday it was 400.
So that thing's expensive, but it's not. That's just. I'm impressed with that, and I've only fucked around with it since Mike has been here.
Another question, shall we? Got a question from Ricky. Ricky said he asked it in Spanish on the feed, but so I would not have known what he was asking. But he said, when squatting.
Hold on, stop.
Yeah.
So tell like briefly like what you and Ricky do when someone new comes to the gym.
Okay. So when someone new shows up to the gym, generally, I mean, I'm really big on messing with people. So I will have a conversation with Ricky while I'll speak English. He'll speak Spanish. And normally this lasts like 20 to 30 minutes. I'm like, yeah, totally. And then we'll like look at the new person, and they'll be like, and then he'll.
Hold on, it's important to emphasize that Ricky's speaking Spanish. You have no idea what he's saying.
I have no idea what he's saying.
And Ricky's pretending like he doesn't know English. Right?
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did that with a guy who does explosive ordnance disposal, and if you've ever met someone who does EOD for a living, they are not very proud of the movie Hurt Locker. And
I don't know why. It's a very good representation of their job and very realistic.
So we're having this conversation, and Ricky, a lot of times Ricky will look at this new person, and he'll be like, and I'll be like, yeah, he's pretty stout. So this particular person, he was asking me to ask him what he did for a living. And I was like, oh, he does like bomb disposal. And Ricky's like, so the guy Curtis pulls up a picture and he shows it to him, and it's a picture of like the bomb suit. And Ricky goes, oh, Hurt Locker. And I can't describe to you how much the blood rushed from his face. And he was just like so disappointed. He's like, yeah, I guess. And at that point, we told him we were just messing with him. And he was like, oh, you guys got me good. And then we don't even call him, now we call him Kurt Locker, based on this experience. Oh, when he met Mike Teixeira, that was great. And a lot of you guys know who Mike Teixeira is. Mike stopped by the house one night when he was driving through, and we did that with Mike. And Ricky's saying a bunch of stuff to me in Spanish. I'm not sure what he's saying, but he looks at Mike and he's like, because Mike is a pretty stout dude, and he looks at Mike, he's like, oh, pectoralis. And Mike is just like, yeah. And then when we told him we were messing with him, Mike was like, oh, cool. Like, yeah, it was a good time. But now the cat's out of the bag, but people might start sharing our secret. But it's pretty fun. Dude, it's pretty fun.
All right, what's Ricky's question?
Ricky's question is, at what weight do you prefer to start adding a belt for squats? And for me, that's pretty easy to answer. I'd say somewhere around 80. I like a little bit of a heavier belt once I get about 80%. Maybe even sometimes I'll even go a little bit heavier, but I like at about 80% if I'm really pushing it. If I'm trying to get, but if I'm trying to get more comfortable with a weight, and I don't know if own the weight is the right way of putting it, but confident enough with the weight, be like, yeah, I can do that beltless. I'm not going to be an idiot about it and be like, yeah, I'm going to go for 99% beltless and potentially hurt myself. But sometimes, yeah, if I want to gain confidence with that weight and know that I can hit it any day of the week and maybe open at a meet with that weight, yeah, I'll go for a beltless. But I'd say like 80%. I like to put a belt on about 80.
So the only this is not a caveat, but like if I'm ever tender in my lower back,
sure,
I'll even like wear the belt.
Put a belt on. Yeah,
I'll wear the belt on. Like sometimes I'll wear it like after the set at 60K on a squat or something. Like I'll wear it at like, I mean, I'm pretty weak right now, but I'll wear the belt a lot if if I've got like tenderness. So, and I really focus on, I put an overemphasis on bracing my trunk properly if I've got issues with my lower back or my SI for some reason.
Yeah, if your back is a little bit fired up, it's definitely, and you're supposed to be doing something beltless, just put the belt on that day. Don't lift with your ego. Every time that I've really lifted with my ego, that's when I get injured.
Yeah, I know Mike was talking about with his clients or his team or whatever you want to call them, that like he'll emphasize, like he gives them an RPE, like do an 8.5 or do an 8 or 7, like to really try and stick to that, because going balls to the wall all the time is how you get hurt.
Mm-hmm. And actually, it was Kenley's gotten back to doing more podcasts, and I've told Justin that I listen to him on this weightlifting house podcast. But he talks about you have to know, I don't know, I guess like, well, some of my dad used to say when to hold and when to fold. Like you have to know, okay, should I push it today or should I really just like throttle back? And once you get good with that, that's when you really start driving progress. Because if you feel amazing, push it a little bit harder. I mean, if you can do it and have an accurate assessment and be like, I know I'm supposed to only hit 90% today, but like I'm on fire. Hit 95. Like if the risk versus reward factor, if you've assessed it. So I don't know, but that gets into really knowing yourself and really, really being honest. It's really easy to put more weight on the bar. It's not quite as easy to take weight off the bar.
Unless you're on a very, very specific type of program that's preparing you for a very specific thing, then you have leeway in your training. Like if it says to hit 90 and you go in and like you're feeling shitty warming up because your back is janky from sleeping on it or because of something that happened at work, like that's the time to back off. But like unless you're doing something extremely specific, like you can go up when you feel good slightly and you should back off. You should always be conservative in training. Or 100% of the time be conservative. That if you have a layoff because you're very slightly sick, all the fucking time I talk to people when they're sick of how to get back into like a training because they want to like try and make progress, but you won't make progress if you do too much too soon. So like when someone's sick, I would literally have them do this: light workout, light. This is over the course of a week, 3 workouts, like light, medium. Then the following week, maybe even another light or like a medium, then heavy. Like then you're like, fuck, if I get sick, then I'm out of training for like 2 weeks. Like that's the way it is. And sometimes it's not about what you're necessarily hitting at a heavier load on the reg. It's about the fact that you did consistent training. The fact that you actually showed up and did a full body training session or whatever it is you squatted that week. Sometimes that is more important. If you squat 50 times in the next year, that's more important than squatting heavy 5 of those times and getting fucked up the rest like the other times and not able to squat for 2 months at a time. It's more important to consistently train than it is to like put weight on the bar. And if you consistently train, then the weight will come.
To end that question, maybe, the last thing I'd maybe like to emphasize is that I'm not a particular fan of I deload every 4th week or I deload every 6th week. Like I lay out a training cycle and I taper towards the end and do the appropriate thing with the volume and the intensity. But life gives you deloads, so that's why I'm not big on the 4th week we're automatically gonna reduce to this percentage or whatever if you don't need it, because that 5th week you could potentially get sick and then that 6th week you're recovering from it. So life is gonna happen, especially if you're a professional. Things are different. Okay, I get it. But if your life is not revolving around training, your car's gonna break down. Someone's gonna get sick. You're gonna have to take a session off. So those are the times when you really need to. You need to be honest with yourself and you need to be like, okay, I need to take a couple light days and then ease back into it. And especially when you do not feel well, that is not the time to go for a PR. No one is impressed when you take like I want a ton of antibiotics, but I drank 3 bangs and I'm just going to go out there and hit some PRs. You're going to go out there and you're going to get hurt. You're not even going to feel it. The next day you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, oh, I really shouldn't have done that. And then the next 6 months you're going to be paying for that.
Not to beat this to death, I'm very particular about certain things.
Yeah.
If you're on fucking antibiotics or you're on a corticosteroid, you should not even really be training. No. If anything, it's a light training session. that drives me nuts. Because if you have something that is warranting you taking antibiotics, then like you have something that you're systemically trying to treat, and your system is fucked up when you're on that. So I like to think about it like this: if you have 100 credits, $100 to spend on recovery, life takes some of those dollars, those doll hairs, and you have to spend them on certain things that might be like if you're sleeping shitty or stress, like mental, emotional stress will consume some of those things, with just work or physical stuff you're doing at work, and then you have the actual training session you're doing. And so if you just spent 30 on actual being sick, and then you have 30 on being sick, you have 30 on just because you have a newborn baby and you're not sleeping and you're kind of stressed out, and you have 30 on this, and you only really have 10 to spend on training, and then you do something that arbitrarily requires like 25 credits, like you're overspending, and that's how you get fucked up, or that's just how you feel shitty, and that's how you decrease you fuck your hormones up, your system. And so the biomarkers, if you were to take blood tests on a regular basis, will be indicative of that. Your total cholesterol, your triglycerides, and your LDL and your HDL will change depending on like how shitty or not your training is, or how you're recovering from that or not. If you're not sleeping as well, that'll fuck your blood levels up. So don't overspend on credits. It's always better to be conservative. And then if you're in your 20s, that's the time to like build your muscular and strength base, because that'll last into your 30s. You just have to like manipulate the variables in a more tentative or careful way so that you don't fuck yourself up when you're like pretty much in your 30s on up.
So Sean is going to be here in like 15 minutes. So I say we do these last two questions that are very scientific, and then we
that one
close it. Well, let's do that one, and then let's let you talk about sleep, because I know how important it is to get that message out.
Okay.
And we'll wrap it up.
This one's arbitrary though. So this question, do you want to read it, or do you want to?
Could a low free testosterone level coupled with a normal test level be related to the fact that my hormone test was taken when the athlete was recovering from a significant strength workout? Okay.
I don't know if he's talking about himself or someone else. This is on the Facebook. They're basically asking, I think what I'm getting out of this is that does a training session affect like you getting a blood test? And that's kind of why I started steering it towards that, because I did see the question. Like it can and it can't. Like sometimes like things will push up the test temporarily, and sometimes they'll drop it temporarily. But the normal, you would expect stresses or not sleeping and bad food and inflammatory type food will fuck your blood marker, your biomarkers. It'll fuck them up, make them depressed or make them go down, whatever. And then doing those things right, sleeping, eating low inflammatory, keeping your physical and mental stress down via meditation and stuff like that, that'll help them go up. So like I would need to refresh my knowledge of how like training affects test and cortisol, because it does have a relationship. Like it can like test can temporarily go down and cortisol can go up. So yes, it's possible. If you did a very hard training session and then the next morning you did your fasted labs and your test was poopy as a result, then get it retested. So generally speaking, I would want like 2 or 3 days of no training leading into a blood test, because I get them regularly. When I'll talk about that in a second, because yeah, but I would have probably 2 or 3 days minimum of no training and then fast into it. And because if I were to do an extremely hard training session, I would expect my shit to be fucked up. Instagram says I have 20 seconds remaining.
Oh, because I think you can only do an hour.
What's that mean? An hour a day or an hour in one?
Live video pause. Reconnecting. Let's start again. No? Can we start live? Checking connection. Checking. We're back.
Oh, but this is good podcasting. We left that on for all that.
Good podcast. Good host.
Someday I do want podcasts to be a regular part of my life down the road. It won't be temporarily in life, but like eventually I'll know how to edit this stuff and do it a lot better.
They'll be able to go back and watch this though.
Yeah, I shared the last one and then people are rejoining this one. So anyway, the fuck were we talking about?
Question.
So yeah, I would have 2 or 3 days before blood tests. Blood tests are super important, and if you're not in a job that like gives them to you for free, then you're gonna have to pay for them. So like, make a point to make all your shit good so you can see where you're at. And then if you for some reason want the data when you are shitty, do it that way. But if you do have a low test, I would always want to if you're like surprised by some of your markers, your biomarkers, then I would get another test, because like what I want to see, if it's like a patient or something, I'd be like, all right, that's interesting. I want to confirm or deny why that's the case. Is it because you've been training so much lately? Is that why your shit's fucked up? Or is that just where you're at? So I would, if there's something very odd or something very alarming to someone, just retest it. Wait a week or two, set the conditions with 2 or 3 days of good quality life, and then see if that influences the markers, because testosterone is a good indicator of like what your system's as a guy is a good indicator of what your system's up to. Now, I could probably sell a lot of stuff and write a book about this, and I will eventually, but like my testosterone was literally 1,000. My total testosterone was 997, and before that, like 6 months before that, it was 947. It wasn't always like that. A few years ago, it was like in the 700s, but like, oh, you're naturally like you have a high test, like that is not necessarily the case. It could be with me, but like I do things and I've lived a certain way since pretty much 2010 or 11 in order to try and have an effect on my testosterone. And I now have blood labs like maybe like in the last 3 years to kind of like reflect that. So whatever I did, like I was in the 700s, and the decisions I make, and I'm going to explain why I think these are the case, push me up to being above 900 consistently. So again, my last one was literally 997 total testosterone. The free was 18 or something like that. So there's sometimes you can see tests and they do a percentage or a ratio or whatever. But these are the things. This is brief because I would like to do, whether or not I'm with Mike or by myself, I'd like to do a video on this. That's kind of something I've been intending to do, because writing articles kind of takes a long time when you're getting really in depth on things. But these are the things that I think are incredibly, incredibly important to having good biomarkers and like having good testosterone. And the first thing is sleep. The one thing that everybody can do that is going to have, that is like steroids. They don't have to pay any money. They don't have to like do something that disrupts their body in order to accomplish it. They have steroid-like effects that helps literally every aspect of their physical health, mental health, and emotional health. Literally every aspect of all those things. There is no debilitating factor from sleeping more, but that thing is sleep that's going to influence all these things. So if I like Sean is going to be here in a little bit. One time I was rambling about this to him. I was like, name a piece of your body and I'll tell you how sleep improves it. And he was like, your toes, man. He literally said it like that. And I was like, God damn it. So like, but like there is a study, and this is consistent in the literature, that people with type 2 diabetes, they put a CPAP machine on them because you're fat, you don't like breathe very well. CPAP machine opens your glottis, pushes air in, so you essentially are getting better breaths of air with more oxygen content because you're getting better breaths in, so your sleep is more restorative and their insulin sensitivity improved. They did nothing else with their diet, nothing changed. They just improved their insulin sensitivity just from sleeping. That's one example of how sleep can be extremely beneficial. If you want to get really nerdy into it, there's a really good podcast, Matthew Walker. I think he's a neuroscientist for like 25 years, been studying sleep that long. He was on Joe Rogan last year. Look that up and listen to that. I've quoted it on the Twitter page, and then I think I posted the show notes once. The show notes alone, you just read those and you're like, fuck. So the one thing everybody can do to have steroid-like effects on their training and their life is to sleep better. So some of the things that it do mentally is that wild improvements in your memory. You store memories better. Emotionally, like I've been journaling since September, I think. Like so consistently, like at least once a week I'm journaling, and that's a whole different maybe podcast or conversation or whatever on like life changes in general. But I'm always getting kind of like how I feel, my temperature gauge, and like when I sleep more, I have a good night of sleep. There's a direct correlation between good sleep and feeling good emotionally. Because if you go into the day and you're kind of like you feel shitty right when you wake up, like it's kind of easy to just emotionally not be as on or good or anything, and then you're able to tackle different tasks much better, or of whatever tasks you have to do when you sleep better. And then physically, all the systems I talked about in the body earlier: skeletal, muscular, nervous, immune, respiratory, circulatory, they say nervous, I don't know. All of those things function more efficiently when you sleep more. So I'm going to briefly talk about some sleep hygiene stuff. I'm going to tell you what I do because Mike was amused at some of this last night. And I started doing this last year and had significant effects. And again, I'm the guy with 1,000 tests without taking steroids. I've never been on steroids. My total testosterone is fucking 1,000, like 997. So not literally 1,000, but 3 nanograms per deciliter under it. So there's a bunch of different things that I'm going to try to touch on, but like being on my phone is recording, but like being on your fucking phone is something that makes your brain go like 100 miles an hour. Like if you scroll through Instagram, you could see, like this is conservative, in 1 minute you could see 20 different pictures on 10 different topics. So your brain is like thinking about all these different things and it's blasted off into all these different shits, and then all of a sudden you're going to look at that and then get in bed. So not only is your mind fucking frazzled, but the exposure to blue and white light in your eyes is going to stave off the production of melatonin by 3 hours. So you are going to try and go to sleep. You might even fall asleep, but your quality sleep as a result of the hormone melatonin that your body makes endogenously in it is going to not be produced for 3 fucking hours until you're in the middle of the night asleep. And some of you are only sleeping 6 hours a night. And I want to say that this is a direct quote. If I get it correct, Matthew Walker said, the number of people that can function on 6 hours of sleep or less expressed rounded to the nearest whole number and expressed as a percent is 0. So like people are like, no, I can function on a less sleep. You cannot. You just don't know the difference because you're so shitty all the time. Shitty is your norm, and you don't know what being a Superman is like. You don't know what being 1,000 milligrams of tests or nanograms per deciliter of tests. You don't know what 1,000 tests is like because you're hanging out at 300. So you have no frame. You're a small child walking in the middle of a movie, not knowing what's going on, which is from The Big Lebowski. So the things that I'll do to prep is that in the summertime here where I live in Colorado, the sun goes down at like 8:30. So I was just like, boom, no more lights. I wasn't using white lights or any kind of soft light bulbs at all. Boom, no more lights. And I would use only red lights, which is fucking weird. And if you live with people, then they're going to have to like adopt this habit. But I have a red light in my room. Mike walked in and was like, oh, this is very only God forgives.
Only God forgives light.
So I only have red light. I will literally fucking walk around with a red lens headlamp. If I'm in the kitchen still because I poorly manage my time, I'll finish doing stuff in the kitchen. I have dimmers in my kitchen anyway, so I'll dim the lights if it's preparing to be red light time. And then if I go full on red light, then I'm doing stuff under headlamp in there. I used to hang a fucking red lens headlamp in my shower. I've got an actual like hanging little light now, but I shower with a red light. I'm a fucking weirdo though, but I'm the one with 1,000 tests. So controlling the exposure to light, because Matthew Walker said the 2 things are circadian rhythm, so consistency in bedtime and wake up time, and light. Those are the 2 things. If you're going to influence 2 things for your sleep, those are the 2 things. I would add on the third of just like what your brain is doing getting ready for sleep. So the lights go dim, the lights go down, use candles, dim your lights, or go red light. So after a certain time, like I don't fucking like use any more lights. And then the phone, like the Droid operating system has like a filter. It's yellow, but there's still red in it. Or excuse me, it's not a red filter. What I guess what I'm saying is it's not like completely filtering out white and blue light. And any kind of like fucking little screen or your TV that you're looking at in your face is a light bulb in your eyes. So like there's an app called Twilight. It makes everything red and you can control the dimness. So I'll dim it all the way down and then it's super red, and that's if I'm on the phone. And then there's a certain time that I just like the phone's done, like no more phone because of the wild brain effect it has of your brain being scattered looking at the phone. So like you want to wind down mentally and emotionally before bed. So I recommend that once you're all ready, prep for bed, and you've been using red light to read fiction right before bed. I dim my headlamp all the way down as low as it'll go on red, and then I'll read. And that might be anywhere from 5 to sometimes an hour if I get it. Sometimes I'll get in bed at like 8 or 8:30. And then I'd like to be asleep before 10, but if I go to sleep at 10 and I don't have to get up till 7, like that's a long time. And so I'm not going to get in the Oura ring or whatever it's pronounced because I have one, but that's how I track my sleep. So I know what my REM sleep and my deep sleep is. I know what my heart rate variability is. I'm not going to talk about that today. I know what my resting heart rate is. Those are important metrics if you're going to be a weirdo and track the shit. But I know exactly how my sleep is, and I know what facilitates it. So like drinking close to bedtime fucks it up. I don't really see a change for me, but like eating right before bed, a big meal, that can fuck it up. Temperature will fuck things up. So you want it to be ideally under 70 degrees, but the closer I'm weird. My house is at 60. Mike didn't like it. My house
Not
is
that
at,
I didn't like it. It took a little getting used.
my house is at 60 in the winter because otherwise it'd be on all the time. But I have a gas fireplace that runs, so like the room is nice and cool, dark. I have like the room's over there. I've got dark curtains everywhere, and then if I wake up and the sun's coming up, especially in the summer, I'll put like an eye mask on. So the light controlling thing is very important, especially if it starts getting light at like 5:30, 6 in the morning. Like unless you're gonna wake up then you need to like keep it dark. So winding down, no controlling the light exposure, no phone, and then reading a fucking book. Like when I've had tons of people like I'm having trouble sleeping, and this is can be work related or not. But if you're fucking like watching a movie with like in your face with a tablet or a phone, or you're looking at something, and this is white and blue light blaring in my eyeballs, that's you're not sleeping, and you're not staying asleep because you're not allowing your melatonin to be produced naturally in order to have good quality sleep. So we're talking about labs and how to improve them, or just total testosterone. Sleep is literally the thing that will help every fucking aspect of your life. And then there's some emotional things and mental things that we could talk about, like meditation and like learning how to be a more empathetic person, all this other shit. But like sleep is the thing that will help literally every aspect of your physical, mental, and emotional health. And I think it's so important. And like you need to be in bed minimum 9 hours. You need to be like you're asleep for 9 hours, because I find that with my ring, if I'm like in bed, like I go to sleep for 9 hours, the actual sleep time is closer to 8. It's usually 1 hour less than the time I'm actually asleep. So you're like, no, I got 8 hours. Like that's gonna be more like probably 7 for most people. And I'm like pretty fucking weird and consistent with how I sleep, and I still will get closer to 1 hour less of sleep than I'm actually like in bed. And that's not in bed reading. That's like once I actually go to sleep, because you go through these sleep cycles and you wake up, and the ring shows that, and it shows the light, the REM, and the deep sleep, and it expresses the REM and the deep as a percentage. So I'm tracking the shit like a weirdo, and so when I'm consistent and I have a no shit, this is the time I'm like done with my phone, and this is the time I'm done with the lights, and this is the time this is my no later than time being asleep, and I do that consistently for a week. Like I feel amazing. So that you don't need supplements. I wrote pre-workout down. We're not going to get into it. I think pre-workouts are fucking retarded. So the things that you can do for your health is just sleep more. And so it takes time management, which Mike and I have been talking about a lot since he's been here. Time management and a commitment to sleep, because it has an effect on your health. And just some other side things, when you go through the day, your brain is normal. Your brain is metabolizing shit like normal. So you have inflammatory byproducts, and that can include the tau and amyloid beta cells that are associated with Alzheimer's. But so you have inflammation in your brain, and the only way inflammation in your brain, and it's a normal byproduct of metabolism, the only way you can clear that is by sleeping. So you literally, like, you can imagine there's fucking little dudes in your head, and they're like, remember, you got all this inflammation. And they're like, fucking, the longer you're asleep, the more they can work. And then, so if you don't sleep much, or you're cutting it off, or your sleep is erratic, they're erratic. They're like, oh, we weren't supposed to fucking start till an hour from now. Or like, oh, we were supposed to start 4 hours ago, and this asshole went to bed at 2 in the morning because he stayed up drinking. And now all the drinking monsters in here, so we can't do our job. So like, I could do a kid analogy all day about this stuff, but like, the brain is super important, because the brain is the center that's going to dictate how the hormones function elsewhere in the body, because you have the brain stem and like pituitary gland that are going to control a lot of hormones, and there's other hormones like down on the adrenals and stuff. All that shit is controlled by the brain, obviously. So like if you don't take care of the brain, then not only are you going to suffer performance wise at work or in the gym or in sex or whatever, like all this shit is going to suffer when you don't sleep as well. So I can't. I don't know. Like I feel like I'm beating the shit out of this.
No,
There's a dead horse on
do
the.
an hour about sleep.
There's a dead horse on the ground, and I'm just fucking like
just sleep more.
Red Dead Redemption, beating the fuck out of it over and over. But like, it's the most monumental thing you can do for your training. Stop spending money on stupid shit. And briefly, I'll talk about this in another podcast. But if you're gonna spend money on supplements, it shouldn't be fucking pre-workout, because pre-workout is fucking retarded. if you want to be on creatine, that's fine. But as far as low inflammatory things that facilitate these blood markers, it's going to be fish oil, probiotic with the right strains of bacteria, which I would recommend getting this book, Healthy Gut, Healthy You, if you want to learn more about that. Fish oil, probiotic, a turmeric. A really good one is the curcumin from Thorne Research. It's kind of the gold standard in nutrition companies, and then vitamin D. And you can get your vitamin D levels checked very easily. If they're not between 40 and 60 nanograms per deciliter, then you're wrong. Or in other words, if they're too low, then it's a pro-hormone, so it's going to facilitate your body functioning properly, and that's what we want to do. Low inflammatory diet, maybe a few supplements that you could add to it, and then sleep are gonna have monumental changes on how you can fucking do everything. And that's something that has been a huge part of my life and a huge part of the things that I teach people in different areas of my life. So, do you have anything to add on sleep?
I'm ready to train, bro. Listen, I'm ready to party. Justin and I haven't trained together in 6 years, so
Yeah.
Sean should be here in like theoretically 2 minutes.
So, and there are more people in here earlier. Different people have been watching, and then whoever ends up listening to this, is it going to happen regularly? Like probably not in the near future, but Mike and I have been talking about it. I do want to put out more content. I'm limited by a lot of different factors, but I guess the more enthusiastic you guys are with interacting with it, then the more incentive I have to actually do it. But we appreciate you listening or watching. We're flattered that people would want to listen or experience whatever we have to say, or
people miss 70's big, bro.
And then so appreciate you guys. Grateful for you listening and then wanting to learn. I'll always continue doing things to try and synthesize information to push it out to you. But we appreciate you, and you can interact in like the comments of this stuff. We'll look at them. But we appreciate you. We love you. I love you.
Me too. We love those dogs.
And we're gonna go train. So,
right, girls?
Rock and roll. Boom.
That was good. Oh, I guess we should.
We gotta turn the podcast off. I'll get it.